So today I want to go with you guys. I'm kind of starting the journey on creating my active headache recovery workbook. So this workbook is to help people start exercising with migraine or another headache disorder and really look at their symptoms and their conditions, exercise safely without making their condition worse. But as I go through this workbook and I make it, I want to show you kind of what I'm working on so you can take actionable steps at home, but also for me to identify areas like, oh, I forgot to include this and it should be in this area, or it should be in a different book or part of the book. So what I did was I took my pillar 1 that I'm working on right now and I made a little guide for people to kind of take away. And it's a pre-exercise planning guide. How do we get from, what's step 1 in this process? How do we know where we want to do? How are we going to go there? What things do we need to consider when we're exercising with migraine? So I'm going to kind of run through this guide with you, one to see and to show you how I kind of sit down with patients or clients when they come to me to help them with exercise planning. So the first step in the planning process here, and if you want this guide, you can download it. It's in the link in my bio, and it's free, and you can really work on it, and you can go back to this video and work on it yourselves. So with living with a migraine or another headache disorder, it means movement needs to be more intentional. We really need to consider a lot of factors of what's going on, and planning ahead can really help you be successful with integrating or getting consistent with exercise to help manage your condition. So we start with goal setting, and there's 2 types of goals we're trying to set here. It's long-term goals and short-term goals. We want to start, and as I'm looking here, I'm seeing kind of some things I messed up here in the order I want it to flow. So I'll make some changes to this later today. But long-term goals are where we want to get to. It gives us a direction ahead when we're planning exercise. And we set goals, and then short-term goals are to help us make small incremental steps to that long-term goal, right? We don't want to start exercising at the long-term goal, and I'll explain that in a minute. But when we're making goals, we're using something called setting them with something called SMART goals. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So here's kind of like an example for what a long-term goal should be. And you should set the long-term goal first and then build out the short-term goals after that. So a long-term goal for somebody with migraine would be, I will be able to walk 30 minutes 5 times a day, 5 times a week in 3 months. So, and that hits all these SMART goals. It's specific, right? What exactly will you be doing? You'll be walking, okay? Yeah, so you can see that, right? How often and how long will you be doing it? 30 minutes, 5 times a day in 3 months, right? And is this attainable? Can you succeed without worsening your symptoms or making your migraine disorder worse? I think that this is a relevant goal. If you said, I will run a marathon in 3 months, and you've gone from sitting on the sofa and never exercising, that's probably not an attainable goal, right? It needs to be something that's realistic and seems very achievable to you. And then it's relevant. Will this support your health or function? And walking is an aerobic exercise. We know that aerobic exercise is great for people with migraine and other conditions as well, to really improve their overall health and wellness and decrease migraine frequency. Right? And then the second one, time bound. When will you check in? So for this long-term goal, I'm going to check in at 3 months. I'm going to hope that the week before that 3 months, so I guess week 12 and week 13, that I'm starting to walk more often and walking that 5 times a week, and I'm getting up to or over that 30-minute threshold that we set. Then after I set the long-term goal, I'm going to break it down into more short-term goals, right? Usually long-term goals is about like a 3-month time frame, maybe a little bit shorter depending on what we're kind of trying to do for patients and how long our program together is. And then we're setting short-term goals. This could be 1 to 4 week goals. An example of a short-term goal related to the long-term goal in this example would be to walk for 10 minutes, 3 days a week after dinner. And that might be a week 1 goal, especially for somebody new to exercise that's trying to see how their body works with migraine. So now that we started the goal setting, we need to go into the next step of the pre-exercise planning. And that's identifying your barriers. So everyone kind of encounters these obstacles along their exercise journey, whether they're healthy or not healthy or have other disabilities or chronic illnesses. But what matters is how we plan for them. It's not just, oh, well, this will come up and I don't know what to do. First of all, a lot of barriers, we can predict them coming up. Like, I have 2 kids. What is my childcare routine so that I can work out and they can be supervised or watched? Or what am I going to do if childcare falls through that day? And will I work out with them? Will I do a modified walk? Maybe I'll take them for a walk with me, right? So planning for those barriers can really help you stay consistent without feeling like you're failing when things kind of go awry. So common barriers to think about when you're kind of planning this. And then if you download this, there's a work section here where you can like write these in, and I give an example. But common barriers would be lack of time. So that might be, how we plan a schedule then. Great, I will do 5 to 10 minute sessions instead of 30 or 40 or 50 minute sessions, right? Pain or fear of pain. Well, I will start with exercises that I already know or movements I know that don't make me worse, right? And if you have difficulty finding that, that's something where you really need to reach out to your healthcare professional or your physical therapist near you to help you figure out what works for you. Childcare demands, low motivation is a big one. Environmental triggers, but again, that goes into the triggers, which is step number 3 in this. And not knowing what to do. Sometimes, they can be confusing, so you really need to plan, what am I gonna do, and have it set up the week beforehand. So in here, in this space where the example I have is, I'm too tired to exercise after work. Okay, great. Then my plan or strategy for that would be, I will exercise or work out in the mornings or at lunch when I have more energy, right? Could be a potential of that. For childcare, if my babysitter gets sick and can't watch the kids in that afternoon, I will go for a walk instead of exercising or going to a yoga class. Those would be ways I would identify the barrier and then create a plan B for when that barrier arises. And sometimes the plan B is, I just can't exercise that day. And that's okay, but you want to be able to know what the barriers are and identify them so when they come up for you. And then we'll kind of get into barriers of recognizing your own triggers. So some people have specific triggers that might make exercise feel harder for them, and things like being overheated, being dehydrated, bright lights. So we want to think of strategies to overcome these, right? Like if you know that you overheat easily, working out in a cool place, or having a cooling device with you while you exercise, right? If you know that working out after a stressful day helps decrease your migraine frequency, that might actually be recognizing stress is a trigger for you. But exercise is a way to help manage that stress, but also you want to exercise then when you know that trigger is apparent for you. Also, if getting low on hydration or low blood sugars, even just sudden drops in blood sugars can be triggers for you. Knowing that I need to eat around my exercise, so that might be, low blood sugar is my trigger, right? I want to eat 30 minutes before and have a snack with me. Those would be ways we would plan that. And I'm recognizing now, I forgot one other thing when it relates to number 2, identifying barriers. We talked about kind of like lifestyle style barriers, but another barrier that I didn't talk to that I need to put into this is comorbidities. What other conditions do you have that can impact your ability to engage with exercise? Are you hypermobile? Do you have POTS? Do you have fibromyalgia? These are things that we need to consider and how they're going to impact your exercise. Now, for somebody that isn't experienced with exercise and knowing how to exercise around multiple conditions, if you really have a lot of comorbidities, this might be a time where you really need to have somebody help you plan out exercise, identify what is going to work with you, and do a lot of problem solving in that instance. But that's really my guide right now, and I recognize that I also need to include starting place, how to find out or create where you're going to start. But this is really, I think, the start of my first pillar for the exercise workbook that I'm creating, and it's pre-exercise planning. Knowing where you're going to start, knowing how you're going to address barriers, I think can be a really pivotal, and I think is, and I know is, a really pivotal part about planning exercise if you have migraine or another headache disorder. So again, if you want this guide, it's in the link in my bio, but definitely check it out. Reach out if you have any questions or you want to kind of go through this planning session with me so you can have like a more guided session.